I knew something was wrong the moment my mom insisted everyone be in the same room. What I didn't know was that the meeting wasn't about family at all. My name is Harper, I'm 25, and this is the story of how a so-called family meeting became the night I was pressured to give up what wasn't theirs to take. If you enjoy real-life stories like mine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. When my mom called me that Tuesday afternoon, her voice was unusually careful. Not warm. Not cold. Measured. She said there was something important we needed to discuss as a family and asked if I could come by that evening. I asked what it was about. She paused just long enough to raise my suspicion. Nothing bad, she said. We just need to get on the same page. Those words, on the same page, had always meant one thing in our family. Someone had already decided something, and this meeting was about making sure no one objected out loud. Still, I went. By the time I arrived, all the cars were already there. My brother's truck, my aunt's sedan, even my cousin, who lived 2 hours away. That should have been my first real warning. Inside, the living room was set up like a waiting area. Chairs pulled into a circle. Coffee already poured. Papers stacked neatly on the dining table like props in a play I hadn't auditioned for. Everyone smiled when they saw me, but it wasn't relief. It was anticipation. My mom stood instead of sitting, which immediately put her in charge. She clasped her hands together and said, "Thank you all for coming. This won't take long." It never does, I thought. She started by talking about family values, about legacy, about how my grandfather had always wanted us to stay united. Heads nodded. Murmurs of agreement floated around the room. Then she looked directly at me. "As you all know," she said, "after Dad passed, certain things were left unsettled." My stomach tightened. The inheritance had been a quiet subject for months, not because it was unclear, but because it was inconvenient. My grandfather had been very specific. He'd left the bulk of his estate to me, with instructions spelled out clearly and legally. He trusted me. That was the problem. My mom continued, "We've been thinking it might be best if everything were redistributed more evenly." There it was. Not a question. Not a discussion. A conclusion. She slid a folder across the table toward me. I didn't touch it. My brother cleared his throat. My aunt avoided my eyes. Someone said, "This is just about fairness." I felt the weight of the room pressing in, the expectation that I would play my usual role. Agreeable. Quiet. Grateful for being included. But something inside me had already hardened. "I'm not handing it over," I said calmly. The silence that followed was immediate and sharp. My mom's expression didn't change, but her tone did. "Let's not be dramatic." "I'm not," I replied. "I'm saying no." That word landed like a dropped plate. She smiled tightly. "You're misunderstanding. This isn't about you losing anything. It's about sharing responsibility." Responsibility. Another familiar word. One that always seemed to come with a cost only I was expected to pay. I looked around the room. At the faces waiting for me to reconsider. At the papers I hadn't opened. At the family meeting that suddenly made perfect sense. This wasn't a conversation. It was a setup. And for the first time, I wasn't going to make it easier for them by giving in. Because the moment I refused, I realized something important. They hadn't invited me to talk. They'd invited me to surrender. And I wasn't about to do either. No one spoke for several seconds after I said no. It wasn't the thoughtful kind of silence. It was the stunned kind, the kind that follows a line going off script. My mom was the first to recover. She picked up the folder and tapped it lightly against the table, as if grounding herself. "Let's all take a breath," she said. "There's no need to be stubborn." Stubborn. Not cautious. Not protective. Just difficult. I'm not being stubborn, I replied. I'm respecting what Grandpa decided. My brother finally looked at me. You know he didn't mean for it to cause problems, he said. It's only a problem because you're trying to change it, I said. My aunt leaned forward, hands clasped. Sweetheart, this isn't about changing anything. It's about preventing resentment. I almost laughed. Resentment was already sitting in the room, thick and unashamed. My mom opened the folder and slid a document halfway out. We had a lawyer draft something simple, she said. You'd still be protected. We just redistribute some assets so everyone feels secure. I didn't touch the paper. You hired a lawyer before talking to me? She hesitated. We wanted to be prepared. Prepared to corner me, I thought. You didn't ask if I wanted to do this, I said. You planned around the assumption that I would. My cousin shifted in her chair. I mean, she said carefully, it does look strange to outsiders. One person getting almost everything. I turned toward her. Outsiders don't get a vote. My mom's jaw tightened. Watch your tone. I met her eyes. Watch your tactics. That was when the mood changed. The polite language dropped away, replaced by irritation that had clearly been waiting its turn. My mom crossed her arms. You're being selfish, she said. Family doesn't hoard. Hoarding implies I took something, I replied. This was given to me. For management, she snapped. Not for control. I felt a familiar pull, the urge to explain myself more gently, to soften the edges. Instead, I stayed still. Control is what this meeting is about, I said. My brother shook his head. You're reading too much into this. Am I? I asked. Because I wasn't told what this meeting was about. I walked into a room full of people and paperwork designed to pressure me. No one contradicted that. My mom inhaled slowly. You always think people are out to get you. That's not true, I said. I think people get uncomfortable when I don't comply. She stood up again, pacing now. You don't understand the burden this puts on me. I frowned. What burden? Managing expectations, she said. Keeping the family together. I gestured around the room. By ambushing me? My aunt spoke softly. Your mother has been dealing with a lot since your father died. And I haven't? I asked. That question hung there unanswered. I realized then that this wasn't about grief or fairness or unity. It was about power. About who got to decide what happened next. My mom stopped pacing and faced me. If you don't sign, she said, this will change things. I nodded. I'm aware. You're willing to fracture the family over money, she pressed. I shook my head. No. I'm refusing to let money be used to fracture me. My brother scoffed. You're acting like a victim. I'm acting like an adult, I said. One who knows her rights. That word, rights, made the room uneasy. My mom sat back down, her voice lower now. You wouldn't even consider a compromise? I thought of my grandfather, the long conversations we'd had, the care he took explaining his decisions. No, I said. I won't. Something hardened behind her eyes. Then don't expect support when this gets messy. I didn't flinch. I wasn't expecting it tonight either. One by one, people began to gather their things. No one said goodbye properly. My aunt patted my arm without meeting my eyes. My cousin left quickly. My brother lingered in the doorway, then muttered, I hope you know what you're doing. I do, I said. When the door finally closed and it was just me and my mom, the house felt stripped bare. You embarrassed me, she said quietly. You tried to corner me, I replied. She looked away. You've changed. Yes, I said. I stopped being convenient. She didn't respond. I picked up my coat and headed for the door. My hand was on the knob when she spoke again. This isn't over, she said. I paused. I know. Outside, the night air felt cold and sharp. My heart was pounding, but beneath it was something steadier than fear. They hadn't gotten what they wanted. And for the first time, I understood exactly how far they were willing to go to try. I didn't drive home right away. I sat in my car with the engine off, hands resting in my lap, staring at the dark outline of my mom's house. The lights were still on in the living room. I could picture her inside, replaying the meeting, rearranging it in her mind until I became the problem and she became the reasonable one. That script was familiar. My phone buzzed before I pulled out of the driveway. A text from my brother. You didn't have to do that in front of everyone. I read it twice, then set the phone face down without replying. By the time I got home, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving something heavier behind. Exhaustion. Not physical, emotional. The kind that comes from realizing you've just crossed a line you can't uncross. I slept badly that night. Every time I drifted off, my mind replayed the same moments. The folder sliding across the table. The word selfish. The way no one had warned me what I was walking into. By morning, the shock had settled into clarity. They hadn't miscommunicated. They hadn't misunderstood. They had planned. The next few days were quiet on the surface and loud underneath. I went to work, answered emails, smiled at coworkers. But every free moment, my thoughts circled back to that meeting, to how easily love had been replaced with leverage. On the third day, my aunt called. I just wanted to check on you, she said, her voice careful. I'm fine, I replied. She sighed. You know your mother means well. I know she means control, I said gently. There was a pause. She's under a lot of stress. So am I said. And I didn't ambush anyone. My aunt didn't argue. She changed the subject instead, which told me everything I needed to know. That evening, my brother finally called. You really blindsided Mom, he said without greeting. She blindsided me, I replied. He scoffed. It was a discussion. No, I said calmly. It was an expectation. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. That's easy to say when you weren't the one being asked to give something up. He went quiet. Then, you know this money could help all of us. I know, I said. That doesn't mean it's yours. That sounds cold. It sounds clear. He exhaled sharply. Grandpa didn't understand how complicated things would get. He understood exactly, I replied. That's why he was specific. Another silence. So that's it, he asked. You're just going to sit on everything? I'm going to follow his wishes, I said. If that makes people uncomfortable, that's not on me. He muttered something under his breath and ended the call. After that, the tone shifted. Messages stopped being about compromise and started being about consequences. Subtle ones at first. Comments about how lonely it must be to handle things alone. About how family support isn't guaranteed. About how legal battles are stressful. I noticed something interesting. No one asked how I was doing. They only asked whether I'd changed my mind. My mom waited a full week before reaching out again. She didn't call. She emailed. It was long and carefully written, the kind of message meant to sound reasonable if forwarded. She talked about unity, about how my grandfather wouldn't want discord, about how managing the inheritance together would protect me from making mistakes. Buried halfway down was the real point. If you insist on handling this alone, you should be aware that it may permanently damage certain relationships. I read that sentence several times. Then I closed the email. What struck me wasn't the threat. It was the assumption behind it. That relationships were something she could withhold. That love was conditional on compliance. That night, I pulled out my grandfather's paperwork and read through it again. Slowly, carefully. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed to ground myself in something real. His handwriting in the margins. His clear instructions. The language he'd chosen deliberately. He had anticipated pressure. He had trusted me anyway. That mattered. The following weekend, my cousin showed up at my door unannounced. She stood there awkwardly, hands in her jacket pockets. I didn't know what she was going to do, she said quickly. About the meeting. I know, I replied. She hesitated. She told us you'd already agreed to talk about redistributing things. I felt a familiar mix of anger and vindication. I didn't. I figured, she said, but I wanted you to know how it was framed. That explained a lot. After she left, I sat alone and let the truth settle fully for the first time. This hadn't been a family conversation that went wrong. It had been a coordinated effort built on misrepresentation. And I had walked into it alone. The realization didn't make me sad. It made me resolute. I stopped engaging after that. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. When messages came in pushing me to reconsider, I replied briefly or not at all. No is a complete sentence, but silence can be one too. Weeks passed. The pressure eased, replaced by a kind of cold distance. Holidays were mentioned cautiously. Plans became vague. I noticed something else during that time. I felt lighter. Not because I enjoyed the distance, but because I was no longer carrying the weight of managing everyone else's expectations. I wasn't rehearsing explanations. I wasn't trying to be understood by people who didn't want to understand. One evening, as I was cooking dinner, my phone buzzed again. Another message from my mom. We need to talk. This is tearing the family apart. I stared at it, then typed a response I hadn't been able to form before. What's tearing the family apart is the belief that I owe you something that was never yours. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. The reply didn't come. And for the first time since that night, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I felt like I had finally stepped out of the trap. The silence that followed my last message wasn't accidental. It was deliberate. Days passed without a reply from my mom. No follow-up calls. No emails dressed up as concern. The quiet felt heavy at first, like the calm before another attempt to corner me. But as the week went on, that feeling changed. The silence stopped feeling threatening and started feeling revealing. For the first time, no one was trying to manage me. I realized how rare that was. At work, my focus sharpened. Without the constant hum of family tension in the background, I finished projects faster, spoke up more in meetings, and stopped checking my phone every few minutes. My manager even commented that I seemed more confident lately. I didn't correct him. Confidence wasn't new to me. Permission was. The next contact didn't come from my mom. It came from my brother again, this time late at night. She's really hurt, he wrote. She feels like you don't trust her. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Trust isn't the same as compliance, I typed. And I wasn't given a choice. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. You know she's not good at letting go, he finally sent. That sentence landed harder than he intended. Not good at letting go. That wasn't an explanation. It was an admission. I put the phone down and sat back, letting that sink in. For years, I'd mistaken her need for control as care. I told myself she was just worried, just protective, just trying to keep things together. But now, stripped of excuses, it looked different. She wasn't afraid of losing the family. She was afraid of losing authority. The following Sunday, my aunt invited me over for lunch. Just the two of us. No agenda, she said. I almost declined, then decided I was done avoiding conversations out of fear they'd be used against me. When I arrived, she hugged me a little too tightly. I hate seeing everyone like this, she said as we sat down. I do too, I replied. She stirred her tea nervously. Your mother thinks you're punishing her. I shook my head. I'm protecting myself. She sighed. She says you're holding the inheritance over everyone. That's interesting, I said calmly, because I was the one put on the spot. My aunt nodded slowly. I know. That surprised me. She didn't tell us the whole truth, my aunt admitted, about how the meeting came together. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. I'm not trying to win, I said. I just don't want to be coerced. I understand, she said softly, even if others don't. That lunch didn't fix anything, but it did confirm something important. The narrative my mom was telling wasn't universally believed. It was just the loudest. A few days later, my mom finally reached out again. She called this time. I answered. Her voice sounded composed, almost gentle. I don't like how this has unfolded, she said. I don't either, I replied. I feel like you're shutting me out, she continued. I'm setting limits, I said. There's a difference. She paused. I was trying to do what was best. For who? I asked. There it was. The question she didn't want to answer. For the family, she said finally. And what about me? I asked. Where was I in that plan? Another pause. Longer this time. I assumed you'd understand, she said. That assumption is the problem, I replied evenly. Understanding doesn't mean agreeing. Her tone shifted slightly, more brittle. You're making me sound manipulative. I'm describing how it felt to be ambushed, I said. Those aren't the same thing. She exhaled sharply. So what do you want from me? The question felt genuine. For the first time, it didn't sound like a trap. I want honesty, I said. I want to be asked, not told. And I want my decisions to be respected, even when you don't like them. She was quiet for a long moment. I can't promise I'll agree with everything you do, she said. I'm not asking for agreement, I replied. I'm asking for autonomy. When the call ended, nothing felt resolved. But something felt different. The pressure had eased. The threats had stopped. I wasn't being pulled anymore. In the weeks that followed, family gatherings were tentative, conversations careful. There was an adjustment period where everyone seemed unsure of where the lines were now. That was okay. Lines exist for a reason. I noticed something else too. Without the constant expectation to manage everyone else's comfort, I had more energy. I laughed more easily. I slept better. I stopped feeling like I was bracing for impact every time my phone rang. The inheritance stopped being the center of my thoughts. Not because it didn't matter, but because it no longer defined my relationships. I had made my position clear. I had refused to be cornered again. And the world hadn't ended. What surprised me most was how empowering that felt. For years, I'd believed that harmony came from compromise, that keeping the peace required me to bend first and most often. This experience rewrote that belief. Peace built on pressure isn't peace at all. As the weeks turned into months, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for approval. not for permission, not for forgiveness. I had chosen myself without apology. And whatever came next, whether reconciliation or distance, I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't walk into another room unprepared. What surprised me most wasn't how the situation ended. It was how normal everything eventually became. Not normal in the sense that things went back to the way they were. They didn't. Normal in the sense that life kept moving once I stopped carrying everyone else's expectations on my back. After that last conversation with my mom, the inheritance stopped being openly discussed. No more emails dressed up as concern. No more, just checking in messages that circled back to the same demand. The pressure didn't disappear overnight, but it lost its urgency. And once urgency was gone, so was its power. I noticed the change in myself first. I stopped scanning every family interaction for hidden meaning. I stopped bracing for the next attempt to sway me. When my phone buzzed with my mom's name, my heart no longer raced. Sometimes I answered. Sometimes I didn't. And for the first time, either choice felt acceptable. My brother came around slowly. At first, our conversations were stiff, careful not to touch anything that mattered. Then one afternoon, weeks later, he admitted something I hadn't expected. "She told us you'd already agreed," he said quietly. "Before that meeting." I closed my eyes. "I know." "I didn't realize until afterward," he continued. "I thought you were changing your mind." "I didn't have one yet," I said. "That was the point." He sighed. "I should have asked more questions." "Yes," I replied. "You should have." It wasn't an apology, but it was accountability. And that was more than I'd gotten from most people. Over time, the family adjusted. Holidays became smaller. Conversations stayed lighter. There was an unspoken understanding that certain lines wouldn't be crossed again. Not because everyone suddenly agreed with me, but because they understood I wouldn't bend. And that understanding changed the dynamic more than any argument ever could have. One evening, I sat alone going through old photos of my grandfather. Pictures of us talking at the kitchen table, walking slowly through his garden, sitting quietly without the need to fill space. He had always respected silence, always respected choice. I finally understood why he'd trusted me. He hadn't left me the inheritance because he thought I'd distribute it fairly in the way others wanted. He left it to me because he knew I wouldn't be easily pressured. Because he knew I'd protect what mattered, even when it was uncomfortable. That realization settled something deep inside me. The inheritance was never the real issue. The real issue was whether I was allowed to say no. And now I had. Months later, my mom invited me to coffee. Just coffee. No agenda. No paperwork. I agreed cautiously. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. She stirred her drink longer than necessary. "I don't like how this all went," she said. "I don't either," I replied. "But," she continued, "I see now that I went about it the wrong way." I watched her carefully. This wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. "I shouldn't have put you in that position," she said. "I should have talked to you first." "Yes," I replied simply. She looked up at me. "You've always been strong." I almost corrected her. Then I stopped. Strength wasn't the lesson anymore. Boundaries were. We left that cafe without hugging, without resolution, but without hostility either. And that was enough. Because the most important shift had already happened. I no longer felt responsible for holding the family together at my own expense. I no longer believed that love had to be proven through sacrifice. And I no longer mistook pressure for concern. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. When people panic at your boundaries, it's often because they benefited from you not having any. Saying no doesn't make you selfish. Refusing to be cornered doesn't make you cruel. Protecting what's been entrusted to you doesn't make you disloyal. Sometimes it simply makes you honest. That family meeting was meant to take something from me quietly. Instead, it gave me something I didn't know I was missing. Clarity, confidence, and the certainty that I don't owe anyone access to my life just because we share a last name. I didn't refuse to hand over the inheritance out of spite. I refused because, for once, I understood my own worth. And that was something no meeting, no pressure, and no manipulation could ever take from me again.